What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like $100,000.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Some you've heard of, and some people have, they've heard of, they've never heard of them, Nate. And one that always, there's the founder of Atari on, and he talks about how he was Steve Jobs' mentor and how he turned down, Steve Jobs offered him 33% of Apple for $50,000 and why he said no. So you could check that episode out. And Ed O'Keefe strikes me. Ed O'Keefe, founder of Wake Up Foods. He talks about challenging himself physically, not just mentally. He completed Kokoro Camp, which is based on a Navy SEAL Hell Week training put on by Mark Devine and SEALFIT. And by the way, running his business, if ever I have excuses, Nate, I think of Ed because he's got 7 kids and he runs his business and he finds time to work out. So if I find myself making excuses, Ed, you pop into my mind. No excuses, okay? This episode is brought to you by, before I introduce today's guest, you should listen to this episode because Nate, I'm going to introduce in a second, runs and owns investmentbank.com and SEO.co. And he's going to walk us through several deals and like just taking us through the journey a little bit, which is cool to see. But the episode is brought to you by Rise25, which I co-founded with my business partner, John Corcoran. And at Rise25, we help businesses connect to their Dream 100 clients, referral partners, strategic partners, form amazing relationships through running their podcast. I get to chat today with Nate, who's awesome and has done some amazing things because of the podcast, case in point, and share his thought leadership and knowledge. And so if you thought about, and Nate has a podcast too, by the way, if you thought about, creating a podcast, give us a call. We've been doing it for over 10 years. You can email us or go to rise25.com and watch my business partner and I make a video, and we banter like an old married couple. So you can watch that there. So today I'm excited. We have Nate Nead. Big shout out to Ryan Nead, who reached out to me, and we just through chatting, this happened. And also shout out to Chris Snyder, who runs banks.com. So Chris always gives me good ideas. So I think investmentbank.com and banks.com have to do some kind of work together, Nate. So Nate Nead's founder of, I mentioned, investmentbank.com and SEO.co. Nate's an experienced M&A advisor and investment banker who successfully managed numerous deals in real estate, software, hardware, digital marketing, and many more. He's founded and operated and exited several digital media, SaaS, and software companies, growing them from startup to multi-million-dollar market leaders. And in addition, Nate, if you weren't busy enough, I'm going to find out probably you have 10 kids or something. In addition to running investment, four kids. Okay, that's still
not 7.
4. Okay, 4 is still
we're working on it.
Impressive. Now you can pop into my head also with, okay, he's got 4 kids. I only have 2, and he's running multiple companies. He runs SEO.co that provides online marketing, SEO, and link building services. They serve anyone from Fortune 500 companies to small startups. So Nate, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy. Appreciate it.
So there's a couple stories you'll walk us through for different reasons, deals-wise, and investmentbank.com. First of all, talk about what you do there and how did you get the domain, investmentbank.com. Does not seem like an easy domain to get.
Sure. So I've been doing investment banking for about a decade, and the old model of it's kind of who you know. It's either you get it from referrals from your CPAs, your wealth managers, your attorneys, and that's how you source your deals, or you're networking with business owners, which is still the best way to get your best leads and opportunities. But I thought, in this new world, there's got to be a way to source leads online for people looking to acquire another business, sell their business, or maybe raise some growth capital. And so I just started hunting around for a really good domain name that I knew I could leverage, because the struggle is exact match domains, love them or hate them, they still do have a little bit more weight And they're more easily sellable down the road, if someone wants to buy them. And so I went and found one that wasn't being used, and I reached out. I think the owner, I'm trying to remember now, the owner was still an investment banker, but they were working for one of kind of your larger mid-market firms, and they had founded investmentbank.com maybe 15 years ago. And then they had shut it down because they were both working at separate places at the time, and I negotiated with them a little bit and then bought it. But then the real work starts because it had no links and no authority, and so it sat without any traffic. We had to build all the content out over kind of a 3-year period.
Yeah. Was that a hard negotiation, Nate? Because I could see, first of all, the person in investment banking, they're used to negotiating. Second, when someone has it for that long, they're like, oh my God, I've already had it for this long. Better get something good out of it.
Yeah. I don't know. Is your definition a hard negotiation that it was expensive? I mean, it was more than I would have liked to pay, but anything more than a couple $100 is probably more than I would like to pay, but I wouldn't, considering what it is, I've already made my money back on it. So was it worth it? Yeah, it was worth it. And, it continues to bring in kind of daily lead flow. But as the saying goes, if you get 21 leads a day for a site like that, 22 of them are pure garbage. So, you have to sift through a lot of kind of bunk opportunities.
How do you value a domain name when it's not been built out? How do you know what you were willing to pay for it?
Yeah, if it's not built out, the only reason I'd really want it for its value is if it had some sort of brandability, and if it's a truly exact match for instance, like SEO.co. If it's truly that type of an exact match domain, I strictly usually base it off of keyword search volume, average cost per click. I might use estabot.com and compare, other domains on there. And so I use a combination of things, and a lot of times it's just gut too. It's like, well, and your ability to pay. It's like, well, it's out of my budget. Sorry, I don't have enough money to pay for it. So it's kind of a weighted thing across different ones. I mean, like for instance, we're launching dev.co for our software development teams, and we bought that like literally about a week ago. We're just building it out right now. So, and that cool. One we had to negotiate as well. So
it's a 3-letter domain, and .co. It's probably not easy to get.
Yeah, we had to, and all the good ones that I've ever had, it's either I bought them in auction, and had to compete that way, and those are I've gotten some cheap ones doing that. Like acquisition.net, I think I got it for like $600 or something. I use Namejet on auctions on occasion, but most of the really good ones that are live domains that I'm using, it's negotiated.
You have to reach out through the whois and figure out all that. Yeah. So we'll talk about the acquisition of SEO.co, which was Audience Bloom, but let's talk about Alaska. You had this company who you helped in Alaska. Walk us through a little bit about what they came to you with. What was the scenario?
Yeah, so it's an oil and gas distribution business, and if anyone knows Alaska, it's really kind of a provincial market. There's 50 or so 60 years ago, when it became a state, you had a lot of families who were really entrenched up there, and it really changed the dynamic of the environment. So each town, whether it's Ketchikan, Juneau, and even Anchorage, but some of those smaller towns, they're really owned by like 5 or 6 families. Each town will have 5 or 6 families that own the whole town. When I say own, they have most of the real estate. They own a bunch of the businesses, and this particular family up there in Ketchikan had this oil distribution business. A lot of the homes heat themselves through, burning of oil in the winter, and it gets real cold up there. And so they had run this business. And the reason I like to tell this story is because it's the perfect example of kind of a competitive auction that you want to run. So the first valuation we did on the business was, I think, $12 million plus whatever was on their balance sheet. And and we got 5 or 6 competing bidders to the table that were all strategic buyers, and ended up selling for $20 million. And so the sellers were pleased. They're just a great family up there. Just a really, really down to earth, awesome people. You know, the dad and the dad who founded it was still alive. I think he's passed away. This has been about a couple of years ago now, but I think he's passed away. He was well into his 90s. The son, who had been operating it for a number of years, was retiring in his 60s, but they'd had it for years.
What were some of the things you did, Nate, to prep? Because I know you are an expert at exit strategy, value maximization, growth strategy. So in that period of time, making sure it gets the maximum amount of value. What are some things you did to prep them and the business before sale?
Yeah, obviously you want a really nice pitch deck so you can show people, but when a lot of deals are done by broad auction where it's kind of spray and pray. You're going out to all the private equity groups, all the both the financial and strategic buyers. In this case, we knew the 5 or 6 people, the 5 or 6 groups that were going to be the ones that would be willing to pay that premium. And then you prepare the financial statements as much as you can so that you're displaying the EBITDA or some measure of cash flow in a way that puts the business in the best light possible. But at the end of the day, it's all about supply and demand. If there's a high demand for the business as a going concern, then and it's a low supply. There's only one main supplier of the gas distribution going through Ketchikan, Juneau. And we also sold the sister business in Juneau. So Ketchikan, Juneau, they now the company that acquired both of those firms owns the distribution pipeline all the way up to Anchorage. So you just know who they're going to be.
That's a key point, though, which is identifying the targeted key buyers. And I know some people. I remember I was in a room full of entrepreneurs, and Vinny Fisher, shout out to Vinny Fisher. He's like, sometimes before he starts a business, he'll reach out to the potential buyers before he starts the business to see what the acquisition would look like and start that relationship from the beginning. I thought I'm like, I didn't think of that. Vinny's super smart on your end, but it ultimately you're saying the same thing. It's like you have to reach out to those targeted buyers. What does your reach out look like, Nate? Like if you want to sell it, maybe they're not in the buying stage. Maybe they are. Like, what do you send initially to get interest?
Yeah, well, usually it's done by blind teaser, right? So, but much further prior to that, you're always having conversations with potential buyers, especially if most investment bankers are really targeted at specific niches. Mm-hmm. So like in the digital media world, there are, dozens of private equity groups that would be interested in digital media type companies. You also have your strategic buyers. And so you're always kind of networking and prepping. And we have a pretty extensive CRM where we keep detailed information on buyers. And so we'll have like their deal parameters in there. We tag them with certain keywords, like maybe they want, marketing technology companies and they want to see EBITDA greater than $1 million. And so anytime that something comes across, you already kind of have your short list, and then you can go broad and create a much larger list. I'm going to close the door because it sounds like the wife and kids are coming back and it might get loud.
We'll have them on, all 4 of them. So that's the value. With investmentbank.com and what you run there, one of the values I imagine is you have these relationships with and kind of targeted pre-existing relationships who may be interested in these businesses.
Yeah, and that's a huge part of it. The world is flat now when it comes to doing deals. 30 years ago, it was all about your own Rolodex. Now you've got things like PitchBook and Capital IQ. And I just spoke with Andy. He's a great guy. Andy, the owner of privateequityinfo.com. They're kind of the poor man's pitch book.
Would he like you saying that?
I told him that yesterday on the
Okay.
phone. I said, Andy, you're like the poor man's pitch book, because they literally they're a fifth the cost of
Okay.
a pitch book.
So it's a positive thing, not a negative thing.
Yeah, no, it's
Okay.
great. They've seen an uptick lately because people are canceling PitchBook because it's too expensive and they still need a solution, right?
Okay.
And
so privateequity.info, you said? What's it say?
privateequityinfo.com.
Oh, info.com. Got
Yeah.
it. Privateequityinfo.com. Okay. We'll link that up.
And so you can pull data from there on relative buyers. You can search by industry, by size. And so the world is flat when it comes to the data. So I think when deal makers have less of an upper hand, I mean, you can be a great negotiator, but it's really about, I think when it comes to doing deals, do you trust the people that that they're going to have integrity? And second to that is, do you trust their prowess to be able to close a deal? And also, I think it's one of those things where, could you see yourself, having having hot dogs with their kids on their kid's birthday? It's like, do you like them?
Yeah.
Get along with them. That's
Yeah.
a big deal.
What else that people may not think of that goes into a deal like that? Because you've done so many of these, I'm sure there's stuff you just do naturally.
So there's so many nuances. I'll reverse engineer it. So when I sold my own home about 3 years ago when we moved, and I thought, I can sell my own home. I'm not a real estate agent, never done it before, but I do these complex transactions, and by golly, it was super easy. Because deals, there's always something. It's never not clean, because the complexity of the transaction, the complexity of each business, their operations are so different. There's so many different ways that you can trip up and make mistakes that and this is not coming from a position of I make my money by selling business. This is just if I were talking to a friend, never sell your business on your own. You at least need an attorney, minimally an attorney that knows what they're doing, because there are so many areas that you can foul up.
Talk about some of those. What are some big mistakes people make?
I think a lot of times, and this is just from one that we're working on, like within first quarter of this year, which all of the 6 or 7 deals that we're working on are on pause right now because of what's going on right now. But I think a lot of times entrepreneurs, their greatest strength is also their greatest weakness when it comes to doing deals. And the greatest strength of entrepreneurs is that they're hard drivers, in that they think of an idea, they want to get it done, they want to get it done immediately, and they will do anything to get it done quickly. But discretion is the better part of valor when it comes to getting deals done. And I think a lot of times you've got people who we measure our success in months and years, not days and weeks. And so when people want to have something done right now, a lot of times, not firing off that email is the better response, or just waiting, because a lot of times waiting to see what will happen, the other side will show their cards more rapidly, and not talking is sometimes preferable to talking. And there's a kind of a healthy balance there. And any really good entrepreneur that's done deals before in the art of negotiating, I think the best thing that you can often do, and this is where the investment banker is there are two reasons an investment banker even adds value to a deal. The first is it provides a buffer. And a buffer is that you're not going to fire off that email or do something dumb. The investment banker is going to do it for you. He's going to take the arrows. He or she is going to take the arrows of, take the fault if someone gets, peeved off on something. And the second reason would be that you have someone there to provide options. You've got someone that's going to provide multiple options to get you the highest value, because providing multiple options gets you the highest value. Yeah. Multiple buyers, multiple bidders, whatever you want to call it.
And the expertise, obviously. Yeah. And any pitfalls, right? Because one pitfall, like you said, is worth a lot of money and a mistake could be worth a lot of money and time in itself. Like people are trying to get it done fast. If they try and do it themselves, I can imagine it will probably take longer than they, if they try it. And what you're saying is it's almost like go against, at least for like an entrepreneur, go against your natural instincts. Like sometimes natural instincts.
Yeah,
right?
it goes against, because I'm an entrepreneur myself, right? It goes against my natural instincts, but and because we're FINRA regulated, the saying always goes, if you can speak it, speak it. If you can speak it and not write it, speak it. And because what's written can't be taken back. And so the old adage, measure twice, cut once. It's more slow and methodical rather than kind of like shoot from the hip type of stuff.
I don't know what your next book is called, Nate, but sometimes I'm thinking book titles, something about, don't follow your natural instincts or something like that. And the guide to entrepreneurs selling their business. Don't follow your natural instincts.
Don't go with your gut. Why your gut is wrong. I think.
Yeah, exactly. So that's your next like best-selling book right there. Okay. I'll
get someone to ghostwrite it because I don't have the time. But
the proven field guide to selling your business. So talk about Louisiana. There's an interesting scenario, and there's a business you sold in Louisiana.
Yeah, so we actually helped acquire it.
Acquire it. I gotcha.
Yeah, so it wasn't us that acquired it. We were working with a search funder. I don't know if you're familiar with that model.
No, go ahead. What is it?
So it's usually done by graduates of top business school programs. So your Whartons, your Harvard guys, Stanford guys, they'll go out and raise get committed capital. They're not raising a fund. They're getting committed capital to do a deal, and oftentimes that committed capital also pay them a salary in the interim to find a deal that they then become the operational CEO of the company, and they'll get some sort of equity slice in the deal, and then a kicker at the end, depending on performance when it's sold in 5 or 10 years. That's the kind of the basis of it, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so this guy had reached out. He had been at Bain, and he had done dozens of buy-side transactions at Bain. He was a Columbia MBA, great guy. I mean, his resume sold himself, but he just didn't have the time to raise the money. And the reason I like this deal is because, this was a spray and pray. We called like 600 groups, because you're sourcing debt and equity. You got to have someone comfortable with the guy that they're partnering with. And Boris brought some of his own money to the table. I think he brought close to $1 million. So he wasn't your standard kind of search fund model, because he did have some capital, but we raised the additional equity and debt to do the deal, and he's still operating the company. This has been about 1.5 years ago now, I think. But I liked that deal just because it was atypical for what we do. Usually we're processing a sell side, or we have a mandate, we're going out and sourcing. He came to us and said, I got this thing under LOI, letter of intent. I'm going to buy it. I just need the money. Mm-hmm. And so we just went out and cobbled up the money from institutional sources. So
what was most successful? So like in that case, sourcing the money is kind of the key point there. Did you find, even though you did a spray and pray, you're doing it strategically also, what was most valuable in that as you went through that process to source the money?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to that data. We've done a similar deal on a capital raise for another business, but the data here was, those that are comfortable with the funding search funders, and so and then processing that data quickly. So if they're not interested, they're not interested. The struggle is that you don't know if someone's there are a few data points in some of those, like PitchBook and private equity info, that they'll say that they work with search funders, but then there's a lot of stipulations. So it was kind of a discovery for us, which was helpful because then the next deal hopefully will be easier if you have if everything else is equal, So it was a little more discovery on that one. And that's true for, people, when someone's trying to sell a business, the optimum scenario is you have an investment banker that's done deals in the field. And part of that is it's just that you're not waiting for them to find the buyer for you. They already know who the buyers are, which is true in some respects. It can be faster, but it's not that much faster if you've got a hustler. That's kind of the way the world works these days. But
Nead, let's talk about Audience Bloom, because that is your own journey of acquiring a business. So how did what was your decision making first deciding I want to even acquire something in that type of space?
Well, I'm always looking for opportunities. So it came across. It's an area that I just understand, so it's not far afield, and I love the model. It's a really high margin model. It's super scalable if you have the right team in place, and there aren't a ton of people who do it as well, who still do it as well as Audience Bloom does it. They just do a great job. And I found them through some of my networks. I mean, it was just by happenstance. It's a remotely run business. All of our employees are all over the country and even a couple overseas. And it happened to be a business that was run by a University of Washington grad one of my employees lives 15 minutes away, and he's, so, and the former owner still lives here in Olympia, Washington. So it was just kind of.
Did you put it out to your network? Did you say, here's exactly what I'm looking for, or was it more broad than that?
No, I just found them. I found them on Biz Buy Sell. I found them on there, and negotiated through the whole thing. And it's nice when the great thing is attorneys. I know all the SBA guys, the finance guys, and so you get a sweet deal from everybody. So when you've been referring business to people for years, it's helpful because you're able to get the best deal on all the processing for the transaction. But apart from that, it's had its bumps after the acquisition. I think the former owner, great guy, but he'd kind of been a little bit absentee for about 18 months because the business, he had set up great systems and processes and stuff. But then I came in and I'm like, well, we want to grow it. So that's when we made the switch from Audience Bloom to SEO.co. And, that's a risk that we took, and it finally starting to pay off. That was over a year ago that we made that move. So
what made you decide to take that risk? Change the name?
There was a little bit of negative press on the company, unfair negative press that's still out there. But there's also I wanted something that when you came to the old website, and you can look it up on Wayback Machine on archive.org, but when you come to the website, it's always helpful to know exactly what they do right at the outset, and I wanted it to be very obvious.
Yeah, you can't get more obvious than SEO.co.
Yeah, what do these guys do?
What do these guys do? SEO.
Yeah, exactly. And you might say, yeah, you probably could have. And the other flip side is when you have a domain like that, then eventually it may take us 3 years, it may take us 5 years, but it'll be a lot easier for us in the long run to rank for terms that are really high volume, high convertibility terms that we never would have touched with the old domain name without a much larger budget on, link building and our own content marketing. So that was probably the main motivation, something that is more of a global brand type of site. So
I want to talk about, the growth strategy. Anyone who buys a business, obviously they want to grow it, so it increases the value and what that looked like. But anything to talk about with the actual deal itself, like putting it together, it seemed like it was almost meant to be Because you went to Washington University, then they happen to be. I mean, is that just a weird coincidence?
Yeah, just a weird coincidence.
Okay, that is weird. Yeah.
He had two other buyers that were interested, and those deals fell apart. One was in New Jersey, and one was in like Wisconsin or something.
Yeah.
So I mean, it just was happenstance that he's in my backyard. And he lives an hour from me.
Was there anything in the deal, like putting together a deal or finalizing the deal itself, that would be important to mention before talking about the growth portion?
Yeah. The negotiations went rather smooth. I think, it was my first, I've been entrepreneurial, but I've never acquired using debt. And so I was super anal. I mean, I took all of their merchant transactions, and I personally went through and did all the quality of earnings check against their tax returns. And that's not something that I typically will do. We'll usually have a CPA do it, but I'm like, I know what to do. And I went through and I looked at all the inflows and outflows for the last, 18, 24 months, and just confirmed that the numbers were real. And I recreated the income statement off of that, and everything checked out. And apart from that, the nuances of things.
Did you decide to get outside sourcing of funds, or how did you end up?
Yeah, I mean, it's a large enough transaction that I did finance it. I used an SBA 7A loan, and there is a personal guarantee on those loans. But I think the most important part is negotiating things like because for the SBA 7A loan, they do a debt service coverage analysis, and we do this this is one of my favorite conversation topics, actually. Is people always tell me, oh, my business, I want to get this for my business, or I think my business is worth this. Well, I just take an SBA 7A loan debt service coverage analysis calculator that we built internally, and I look at it and I say, okay, if your business is worth this, then it would require a debt service coverage on your EBITDA or your cash flow to equal Y. And given that, I compare it to a cap rate on a real estate deal. And if it, in so many cases, people don't realize, number one, real estate's a lot harder to screw up, and a business is easy to screw up. If you do something wrong, you can foul up the whole thing. And so if you don't know what you're doing. And so I always say, so number one, the risk profile of buying a business is much higher than buying real estate. And number two, for that risk profile, you should be compensated in the return on your investment above and beyond what you would on a real estate deal. And so if you're a seller and you say, hey, my business is worth $10 million, well, do the math on and comp it against, and I just use this as a comp. I comp it against what would it equal? What would the cap rate equal if your business were a real estate transaction?
So that's the high side is what you're talking about.
What's that?
Is that like the high end because you can't screw up the real estate?
Yeah, it's easy. It's easy to, look, if you owned an asset like real estate, you could hire somebody to manage. It's just easier to manage. There's not all the operational controls and everything. It's just a lot more complex in a business, And so I always comp it against that. That's my benchmark, is kind of commercial real estate, cap rate. And if you're way off base on that, it's a no-go decision if you're a buyer. If you're a seller, it's like, well, you're priced out of the market. Do you really want to sell? Obviously, you don't really want to sell because you're not priced within what the market will bear. And unless you're willing to find that needle in a haystack buyer who thinks you're that strategic, home run, but the WhatsApps and Instagrams of the world, that's funny money. That's not real. That's not real in the normal world of business. Most deals are done at 3x EBITDA, 3 to 4x EBITDA on anything, less than 10 million in revenue. So that's just kind of the nature of the beast.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that thought process. And then people can't go to investmentbank.com and find that calculator. That's something that you'd use internally.
I'd be happy to share it if you want.
I think you should put it on your site. have people like do calculations, drive some
Yeah, I need to
traffic.
do an interactive version of it and
Yeah.
just say, hey, you think your business is worth this? Go just fill out the form here, and it'll tell you
Yeah.
what it's worth.
Totally.
Yeah, it needs
Yeah.
to happen. It needs to happen. I just have it. I built the Excel spreadsheet a number of years ago because I got tired of people saying my business is worth this, and I'm like, well, no, it's
That's
not.
the new page. Tired of your business worth this? Actually put it to the test. Here's my internal calculator.
Yeah.
I know someone, you can hire him at dev.co probably to put it on your site.
I know plenty of guys. It's just prioritization, right?
I know.
I'm
just giving you a hard time. I'm allowed to do that. So you buy it. Then what's some of the steps you do to grow the business after buying?
I think, we're obviously doing our own content marketing. So this is an interesting discussion just from like if you're running a website, right? So the website had, I think, 1,300 pages and posts on it. And we took all of those pages. If you go to archive.org, you can see the old site. It was kind of an ugly baby. And we took all of the content and consolidated it down to less than 300 posts. I think when we were done, it was down around 280 posts and pages total. And we took some posts that were like 500 words and combined them with other posts that were a couple thousand. So we have a few blog posts on there that are 10, 15, 20,000 words. And then we consolidated the link equity. So we 301 redirected all the links from 5 different posts down to 1 post, so you get that extra boost. And we also changed the domain name at the same time, which super negative impact on traffic and rankings and everything. It was a huge risk, but I knew that as long as we could weather the storm with existing clients for, say, 6 to 12 months, then we'd be good. And so we redesigned everything. We did all the 301 redirects properly, and we're starting to see it come back out of the sandbox a little bit. It's taken a little while, but we're ranking for things like link building service and stuff like that. So
nice.
we get leads off of it more readily now.
Nate, talk about the services you provide there. What should people go to there and check out?
Most of what we do is link building. And when I say link building, we have, Jason, the former owner, really great networker when it comes to publications, like really high-end publications where you might want to get a brand mention or a link from. And in that, we just have, and we now have team members that do outreach for building the links, and we're constantly adding new opportunities. So our primary focus is really content marketing. So I think 17 members of our team are all writers, and they write for some really great publications out there online. And so that's the primary thing that we do. And probably about 40% of the revenue of the business comes from other agencies. So we are the back office support for a lot of other agencies who don't want to and just don't have the capacity to do link building at scale or do content marketing at scale. So white labeling our services. We have a lot of clients who, this happens regularly where someone will come to us and we're like, hey, don't we already have this account, but it's under an agency, so we're already doing work for them through someone else.
So you're doing 2 things that work for them.
Yeah. Well, and usually we'll alert the client. So we don't want to step on anyone's toes. We want to keep a high level of integrity and honesty with our clients. So we'll say, hey, so-and-so reached out to us, and then we just pass them back to the client. So, but we have about 40% of our revenue comes from that. And, we do some pay-per-click management, and we are now, the growth opportunities now that we're looking at is we're bidding on some corporate and larger requests for proposals. So those are much larger contracts putting together. And that's the benefit of being an investment banker, putting together large proposal documents using PowerPoint and stuff. That's bread and butter. So we're doing
what kind of corporations are a fit, or what would be an example? I remember when we were scheduling this, like, Jeremy, we have a bunch of big corporate proposals we're putting out. So can we push this to another week? Because it sounded like you had a bunch hit at once. What would be an
We had
example of?
2 last week. A couple large university contracts. I signed some NDAs, so I can't disclose them, but a couple large university contracts that have large budgets for everything from content marketing to link building and SEO, and they want some web development, and so kind of across the map.
What's like a popular service? I mean, you offer a lot of things. Like, let's say someone wants to grow their content marketing. What's a popular service?
Links are kind of the name of the game. They still have such a high correlation in the search engines, and it's hard to get away from that. So usually, depending on the budget, we work with small businesses as well as large.
Yeah.
The small businesses have been hit pretty hard of late, like the local SEO. We don't do too much local SEO. Our biggest thing is our biggest bread and butter clients. We're really diversified. So we have clients in real estate, and e-commerce, SaaS, lots of lawyers. And so our bread and butter service is really, someone's got a keyword that they want to rank for, attorney in Chicago or whatever it is. And the team will assess the site, do the site audit, and then kind of make recommendations based on what their findings are, and then kind of go after it, when it comes to building the links. So
it's funny, Nate, I've had people come on and talking to them after having come on the podcast. I was like, one of the reasons for coming on the podcast was SEO. They're like, I know I'm going to get a bunch of links.
Oh, yeah. That's true. And we get people requesting that all the time.
Yeah. Get a bunch of links
they
back.
In fact, I ought to refer people to you. I've got a couple in my email.
Exactly.
I've got a couple that I'm looking at that came in within the last week. I really will. I'll send them your way. There's some interesting. It's not the core focus of what I'm doing right now. I'd love to.
No, but it's like, okay, they will get a bunch of links. If it's a fit for my show or for someone else's show, then they'll get a bunch of amazing links, all over the place. So
it is one of a handful of strategies. And in fact, I think podcasting right now is underutilized when it comes to SEO.
Totally.
And the reason I say that is syndication. There are, if you're using, like, we use Libsyn, and if you're using Libsyn, it'll syndicate to Podbean, iHeartRadio, and what's the other one? There are like a half a dozen that you can get syndicated to.
Totally.
And you're getting domain authority links in the 80s and 90s for free, basically for free, for doing a little bit of work, and you're getting 5 or 6 per episode because you're syndicating. And so every episode you release, you get 5. Do you know how much that would cost?
You're preaching the choir here. Totally.
Yeah. Do you know what that would cost you for our services to do that? If you don't have a podcast, this is me preaching, but I know this is what you do. So I'm just kind of doubling down on your audience here, because it's huge. You should be podcasting.
Yeah, totally. And that, for when we tell people, that's like icing on the cake, because when you really figure out who your best relationships are and you want to give to them and have them on your platform, but there's all these added benefits. Like you said, SEO alone, I've had people search other guest names and I'm the top 3 search results because I'm on YouTube, my website, and one of those syndicated podcast channels. And so they're searching that person's name and I'm the top 3 search results.
Which could be huge. Which could be huge given whatever name it might be, right? So
totally.
First you're not going to get a lot of search volume for my name, though. So don't bank on that.
We're going to keep increasing that for you, all to benefit you. It's all about investmentbank.com and SEO.co. So in the end, it goes back to where your sources are. So first of all, Nate, thank you. I want to point people, I have one last question, but I want to point people to go to SEO.co, investmentbank.com. Check out everything Nate's doing. It's really amazing what he's done on his journey, starting and helping other people, acquire companies, grow companies. So Nate, the Boy Scouts of America, I see you do some work with.
Yeah, I am an Eagle Scout, and so I love scouting, and I think scouting provides a lot of value. But I love camping, and I love going out and just going. I mean, my favorite things that I did in scouting were 50-mile backpacking trips. I think I did, 3 or 4 of those growing up, and I just, it's a lot of fun. So the scout committee chair is more of an administrative role though. And that's what I've been doing.
What did you get growing, being an Eagle Scout? What is a story that you think back on that kind of represents your journey as that?
I think I love, my first 50 miler I did when I was 13. And for a kid that's carrying like a 60-pound pack that probably doesn't weigh, I probably weighed 100 pounds, and it's just a good character building exercise when you're hiking 10 to 15 miles a day with, a 60-pound pack on your back that weighs more than half of your weight, and you're preparing your own food, and you're not connected to, back then there weren't cell phones anyway, but you're just completely back to nature. There's nothing else to focus on. And I grew up around here in Seattle, and I'm not biased in the fact that I believe that we live in probably one of the prettier areas in the country, if not the world. And so hiking around Mount Rainier, in the summertime when the weather's nice and you're filtering water out of these crystal clear streams and swimming in mountain lakes, it's awesome. You just can't beat it,
Picture that. Thank you, first of all, Nate. Thank you, Ryan, for making sure this happened. And everyone check out investmentbank.com, SEO.co.
Thanks, Jeremy. Appreciate it.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.